Well, Happy New Year and welcome to our first webinar of 2025. I hope everybody had a nice holiday and we're ready to get back at it in 2025. My name is Pat Dunn and I'm from the American Heart Association Center for Health Technology and Innovation, and I'm honored to be moderating this crucial discussion today. As AI rapidly transform healthcare, it's absolutely vital that we establish robust validation frameworks to ensure these powerful technologies remain safe, effective, and worthy of our trust. To help us navigate this complex landscape, we have an esteemed panel with us. Dr. Sumir Patel from, is it gesund.ai? I'll let you introduce yourself later and properly pronounce it, hopefully. Dr. Aldo Badano from the FDA. I'm sure everybody's interested in what the FDA is thinking about these ideas. And then Dr. Josh Kaisen from the Human-Centered AI Institute. So we'll be diving deep into how we can ensure AI systems in medicine are reliable, ethical, and truly beneficial. We're going to be using a Q&A session, so as we go through, feel free to put your questions into the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to try to address those questions. So with that being said, let's go ahead and begin. We're going to start with just a brief round of intros. This is such an esteemed panel. We don't have an hour just to go through everybody's CV. So we're just going to start with brief intros, basically your name, affiliation, title, and role, and then we'll go around a second time and go a little bit deeper on your role and experience. So Aldo, would you like to start?
Thank you, Patrick. Hi, it's my pleasure to be in this panel. My name is Aldo Badano. I'm with the Office of Science and Engineering Labs at the Center for Devices and Radiological Health at FDA. And I currently serve as Director of the Division of Imaging, Diagnostics, and Software Reliability.
Great. And Josh?
Sure, thanks for the introduction. So I'm Josh Kaisen. I'm the Director of the Human-Centered AI Institute at the University of Houston. And we'll get into basically our research and what is human-centered AI in a little bit, probably as a discussion start. Beyond that, I'm also teaching in the Bauer College of Business Information Systems.
Great. And Sumir?
Good day, everybody. My name is Sumir Patel. I'm the Chief Medical Officer for gesund.ai. Gesund stands, it means healthy in German, so we work with healthy AI. We are the bridge to getting your AI models out into clinical practice in a efficient and regulatory compliant manner. In addition to that, I'm a neuroradiologist and director for the Division of Community Radiology at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia.
All right, and we're going to break around the order each time. So we'll have Josh start. If you can just go a little bit deeper into your role and experience in AI.
Sure, my role and experience. So my background is actually in physics. Once upon a time, I was a physics PhD. And back then, AI used to be called machine learning. So I'm sure some of you remember that. Very recently got rebranded as AI. So I worked in creating neural networks for CERN to help detect electrons and muons in our particle jets, some fancy terms for basically we did what the current capabilities of AI do, but about 12 years ago. And those capabilities haven't advanced too much. It's just the accessibility. So what recently I've been studying in my research is how does that accessibility affect humans, affect labor, affect business? And that's what we're really interested in these days. So how does something like ChatGPT, a widely accessible tool, impact creative work in a digital platform is one of the research questions we may ask. And shall I go in more detail, or I think this is a nice little sample for now?
Yeah, it's a good sample, and we'll get back to it. I like what you say about, it used to be machine learning and now it's AI. It seems like everything now is called AI, whether it's truly AI or not. So that's a good distinction.
Yeah, we call it statements AI now too. So
Samir, if you can go next.
Sure. So my foray into this world we call AI started probably a long time ago when, as an undergraduate, I was interested in the interplay between biological science and computer science, and had a project where we were modeling cardiac myocytes with software. I thought that was pretty interesting. And fast forward a couple of years, as a practicing radiologist, lo and behold, we're using AI in our practice daily. And I got really interested because now at this juncture where we're actually using the software, we're using this AI and to make clinical decisions for real patients in real time. I wanted to get under the hood a little bit and figure out and learn more about it. I'd left computer science a long time ago, but I still now I'm kind of circling back and very interested in how that works and how we can make sure that it's still doing what it's supposed to be doing. And that's what brought me to Gesund.
That's great. And Aldo.
Yeah, so let me tell you a little bit about my role in the Office of Science and Engineering Labs, which is the regulatory science research arm of CDRH. And our role is to promote innovation for the development and evaluation of new life-saving medical devices. Our office is an ISO 9001 certified research organization, and we have about 20 programmatic areas developed with substantive customer engagement, including industry and practitioners and innovators that are in the audience today. One of these programmatic areas, one of the largest, I would say, is AI machine learning for medical devices. And our product as an office is the what we call regulatory science tools. And these are innovative open source tools for assessing safety or effectiveness of new technology that innovators can readily and voluntarily incorporate in the stages of development and assessment of their technology. These tools can be computational pipelines, data sets, models, bench test methodologies, assessment tools, and more. If you search for OSEL and tool, you'll most likely land in the FDA catalog of regulatory science tools, which at the moment has about 50 tools covering a broad range of product areas, including cardiovascular, and imaging, and reader studies, and computational models and data sets. I also wanted to say that my background is in physics. I worked primarily on computational knowledge-based models of imaging systems, which hopefully we'll cover that later on, is a key part of feeding these algorithms physics knowledge so that the performance can be improved. Let me also say that our team at FDA was involved in the very first device that was approved in the mid-'80s, actually, using a very crude version of a neural network for screening pap smears. But however, as you know, the number of submissions and the activity in this field has really exploded in the last 3-4 years. So our team has been helping trying to develop new assessment tools to meet the challenges of assessing these new technologies.
Thanks. That was a pretty thorough overview, but I'm sure a lot of people on this webinar are very interested in not only what you think, but what the FDA is thinking when it comes to AI. Any additional insights into just the overall view of where AI is and where it's headed?
Yeah, and this is very timely. Earlier this week, FDA released a draft guidance related to AI-based medical devices. I will put the link in the chat in a moment. This is draft guidance, which means it's not final, but reflects a common baseline for many types of AI devices, including imaging devices. I encourage all of you to go through it and read and submit comments as well. But in terms of the science of evaluating the technology, always hard to keep up with innovations so that the safe and effective products that are being developed can move into products or be translated into products that benefit patients. And on the regulatory science area, I'd like to maybe highlight 3 of the 6 priorities that we've identified, and you can find those in our website. Number 1 is data. Data is crucial, and that's been recognized not only in medical applications, but in other AI fields where data becomes really a bottleneck in many applications. The second one of our priorities is measuring and mitigating bias in algorithms. That's an area where we've been very active. We've released 2 tools in the last few months that help developers understand and mitigate a bias. And then the third one is uncertainty quantification. Part of our role is to provide metrics for quantifying performance, which is a challenge. But what's more challenging and where we're spending more time is on, you have some type of performance, but then what's the variability of that? And say your device is applied in another clinical center. Is the performance expected to be the same, or what can we predict in terms of uncertainty estimates?
Great, thanks. Josh, can you share a little bit more about human-centered AI? What does that even mean, and how does it work?
Absolutely. And I can tie a lot into tools Aldo just mentioned as well. So AI, it's kind of scary. It's daunting. It seems like it's very broad in its application. It feels like its capabilities and its potential is really just span off out of control in the past few years. And well, it's very important to conceptualize this thing as a tool. It's something that's there to assist humans to work. And at the center of that is, of course, the person, the human. So to understand the benefits, the impact of AI, we have to understand it through the guise of how do humans work with it? How will it affect human labor? How will it affect business interactions? Not just study AI's productive capabilities in a vacuum. So when we're looking at business research or economics research, we're saying AI on its own, it's great, it's a really nice tool, but what we care about is how it will impact the world that we interact with every day. And to really fathom that, to really contemplate it, we need to understand that relationship. Do humans trust it to interact with it and use it in their work? Is it reliable? Is it something that's accurate? Is this accuracy conveyed to the user, to the consumer or patient? I'm in business, so I call them consumers. I think that's probably something we don't want to say for patients in hospital setting, but the way I think about things, it's my lingo. So I'm gonna try and use the word patients, and not I call them consumers. I think that might not be a good idea. But how does that impact them? Also, the practitioner, do they have this understanding of the accuracy, of the reliability of the model? How does the practitioner implement that into their decision-making process? How much does the practitioner trust this technology to use it to improve their performance? And are all these factors conveyed onto the patient or the end beneficiary of the technology? So there's a lot of processes all involved throughout this interaction. It's very complex, and there's a lot of different facets of the study. So it opens up kind of more so than just we have one tool, maybe like ChatGPT. We can study this whole kind of interplay between how it affects people, and any one of those changes is basically human-centered AI. So this is what we're studying. Not AI in a vacuum, but AI in the human interaction, the whole spectrum of basically what that implies.
Great, thank you. And Sumir, I'm not sure if I fully asked you the question about your role and deep experience. So feel free to expand upon that. But also, I'd love to learn more about Gesund's approach to validating AI, and especially as a physician, why is it important for AI to be valid? It may seem like an obvious question, but I think it's a question that probably isn't asked enough. So please.
Of course. No, thank you for that question, Pat. There's validating AI means so many different things, and there's technical validation and clinical validation. What we do at Gesund is get models through in the technical and clinical validation piece of it by putting the 3 main components, as Aldo kind of mentioned before. The 3 main components when you're working through an AI model is the model itself, of course. There's the data, which comes from disparate sources sometimes, and so you want to make sure that the data is bias-free, is robust enough that it can be applicable for different kinds of patient populations in different settings. And then the third piece there is a lot of the times you need the human in the loop. And so that human in the loop is occasionally, in our case, a lot is board certified physicians that go through the data matched with the model and do the annotation work and the ground truthing and make sure that the model is still doing what it's supposed to be doing. And we put all that together in a tech stack and kind of ease ease the concerns of our customers, our clients that are model developers, getting their models out through regulatory clearance and then out into practice. And so the out into practice part is where a lot of the physicians that may or may not routinely interplay with the under the hood side of AI interface with AI. And that's where it gets really interesting as well, is because you have these models that are out there in the world, and you have physicians that are using them, and practitioners and providers that are using these models, and they trust them because for the most part they work well. But one of the properties we've noticed of a lot of these models is that they tend to drift. They'll drift, say, for example, if a new CT scanner comes online, that might change how the model operates. And so you might not have as good validity, as good accuracy or sensitivity specificity on the output. And so we want to make sure that we keep an eye on that. If there's a new hospital that's acquired, for example, and that brings in a different subset of patients, a different patient population, so that might not work properly with your model. And so you want to make sure that your model is robust enough to withstand all of these changes. And if it does change, which we expect it to change, you should be able to catch it and then fix it. And that's where Valid AI really comes into place, and that's where we help out.
Thanks. You all three touched in slightly different ways, but really, the importance of the human, being part of the process. At the American Heart Association and the work that we do, we call it human-enabled AI. So it's really not man versus machine. It's, how do we design these systems so that they can enhance, the humans, both the professionals, the clinicians, but also the patients. How can we help that patient make better choices or better decisions? How can we help the healthcare professional make better decisions and be better clinicians, as opposed to trying to replace them? So that's our thought. We'll go back to Sumir. So, there's a lot of stuff out with AI. Obviously, it's a hot topic. What are you really excited about when it comes to AI?
Right now, I'm excited for the world of agentic AI in healthcare. And by that, I mean, if you have certain, what we call agents, AI agents that do specific tasks really well, and you can just trust that agent to do that task for you. I'm really excited for that piece of it. And so by way of example, say you have and for a heart cardiology example, say you have calcium score screeners, right? So we all know the calcium score screener exams are a dedicated exam done on a gated low dose CT. Now, what's being put into place in a lot of centers today even is calcium score screening on non-gated routine chest CTs. Say a patient comes in for a pulmonary embolism, they get a CT scan for a PE. You don't typically quantify the calcium on those scans, but it's there. And so now we have AI models that are out there catching that, quantifying it, and giving a risk score. Now take that a couple steps further and say, all right, well, that's caught, yes, but now we want to follow up on that patient. So let's automatically plug them in to the next cardiology follow-up visit or cardiology new patient visit, because they don't have a cardiologist yet. And that's where the agentic AI really comes into place, to say, all right, we're going to run our calcium screener AI agent, and they're going to catch all these folks, and they're going to plug them into routine cardiology care that they need, because their calcium score was through the roof, and they didn't know that yet, and nor were they planning on knowing it, because they don't have a cardiologist, and they weren't planning on getting a calcium score screening study dedicated for that. And so that's kind of really exciting. Other than that, there's still the low-hanging fruit. We still use fax machines in healthcare. So let's figure that piece out. I'm still typing in numbers sometimes from time to time from a screen. And so let's figure that piece out. So those are other low-hanging fruit that I think can definitely be tackled in healthcare.
Great. Aldo, what are you excited about?
Well, this might sound a little boring for some, but I'm really excited about evaluation of AI, because we are bombarded. We as in the general public really, and particularly in the medical space, bombarded with new approaches, new technologies, new solutions. And it's hard to tell what's good and what is good enough for the application. And that's just a balance between performing a very, very rigorous and lengthy and expensive study, which is impractical in many cases. And having something that's least burdensome for companies so that the good performing devices can get to patients in a timely fashion. And again, I want to get back to it's becoming easier and easier to generate AI tools. We have now AI tools that generate AI tools themselves and can code. But at the same time, it's becoming more and more challenging to really put together a good evidence package to ensure safety and effectiveness. And that's really what excites me and what keeps me up at night as well. And again, there's a lot of these comes down to data. And I wanted to touch on two things very quickly. It would require solving the data problem in this area would require all stakeholders to join efforts. It's a big problem. It's a hard problem. And we just announced with a joint program with ARPA-H called Index that is meant, it's an imaging data exchange program that's aimed to create a platform that would connect data providers and data users, and as well as service providers like annotators and other types of services. We think that that's going to be a significant contribution to accelerate this innovation and make data accessible, high quality data accessible for developers. Because we all know, in addition to that even one of the things that concerns me a little bit is that even if we had all the images in the world from everybody, we might not have enough to train, validate, and test all the technologies that are coming up. And remember, in most cases, you don't test a technology and that's the end of it. Most of these technologies will come back in a couple of weeks with an improvement and you need to retest. And so the other area that I will talk later a little bit about is how can we use synthetic data as ways of perhaps addressing the issue of data in medicine.
Great. And Josh, what are you excited about?
Sure. So maybe this will give Aldo a lot more work on evaluating these tools, but I'm really excited to see the applications that come about from the new practitioners, the new generation of workers. Since this is a group that, whether we intend it or not as educators, they're being trained in AI. They're basically integrating this tool into everything that they do. Sometimes it's writing essays for courses. Sometimes it's a little bit more a little bit more beneficial for them, a little bit more productive in terms of their learning a new way to use ChatGPT to assist them to practice for an interview, for instance, by assigning it the role of the interviewer and having them go back and forth in terms of these discussions and give them real-time feedback. Basically, I learn about new applications very often from the students I teach. And this is really exciting to me because this is a generation that's trained on AI before they're trained on business problems, before they're trained on the real world. So their perspective of how they think about these things is completely different than people like us that have been working already. We're already kind of bogged down in terms of this is how we do these things. And now how do we say we already do these things? Let's put AI on top of it. It's a bottom-up approach. They have the AI and then they learn these things. Hey, I know this skill, and that they think of a whole new way of looking at it. So this is really exciting for me. I have no idea what it's going to look like, but I think it's going to be pretty surprising in terms of the ways in which this is used by workers that are just starting in their careers. And I also think that the labor market may shift to favor these new workers, so it's a little bit less daunting for them to place, as was the case coming out of COVID, and still is the case for a lot of people looking for jobs. So the labor market shifts that have to accommodate this abilities or this new set of abilities for new graduates. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens there.
Great. Well, with everything that gets people excited, there's always the potential for concern as well. And it's important to be thinking about both sides of that. So we'll start with Sumir again. What are your concerns when it comes to AI, and especially in the, within the lens of trustworthy and validated AI?
Sure. Yeah. My biggest concern is complacency. And that means, so as providers get used to using these AI models in their day-to-day practice, there might be an era or an era of complacency where they feel that they trust it, and that implicit trust may degrade the quality of their actual work had it not been there to begin with. So they're not going to pay as much attention because they're trusting this AI to do tasks X, Y, and Z. But if and when that AI drifts, that model drifts, or there's something that causes it to not function as it previously did, they're going to be less attuned to be able to catch that. And that's kind of one of my biggest concerns here. And so being able to make sure that that model, that AI is trusted, is valid, and having specific metrics to measure that on an ongoing, continuous basis, I think is very important. And that's one of my biggest concerns, is that there's not really great infrastructure for that yet. And so as we're working to build it, I think a lot of the work that Aldo's doing at the FDA with around uncertainty quantification, I think that's a huge bit of it as a way to measure that. But a lot that's definitely one of my concerns that we got to tackle as an industry.
And Josh, what are your concerns?
Yeah, I think complacency is certainly one of the primary ones. For me, actually, the convenience of AI is something that is quite alarming in terms of it might actually lead to efficiency losses. It's really easy to feel like you're doing a lot of work and generate a lot of content on the writing side of things. I'm not a medical doctor. I don't really know the use cases there. On the writing side of things, it's really easy. In the research side of things, it's really, really easy to produce a lot of content. But is that content high quality? Very rarely. And well, what ends up happening is students, graduates, researchers, postdocs, they'll pass that kind of bunch of content onto us, and we have to evaluate the quality, and it ends up making a lot more work for us over very little benefit. And so I think that the convenience of the tool is going to lead to a lot of, in the short term, efficiency losses while people learn what's quality, what should I be alarming or alerting my my seniors to, what should be sending to journals as quality research, what should be the oversight in terms of evaluating those tools, letting those go through to someone that is required to make a decision in terms of whether this is public facing or whether this is something that gets published by the university. It's going to create a lot more administrative work, basically, and a lot more quality control work. And there's also another aspect to this in terms of it's shifting the way in which people do work. And the shift in work is something takes some adjustment. It's something that causes a lot of mental stress and makes it so you feel a lot more exhausted in work because you're doing things that you're not used to doing. I'm evaluating text written by an AI more often than I'm evaluating text written by a student. I know this. I'm telling the student to learn how to use this tool because I think it's something that's going to be really effective in the future. But it's new for me to evaluate, to say, hey, the student got this definition wrong. Does that mean the student doesn't know it? Do I have to teach them that? Or is that because they didn't feed in the command to the AI, the prompt to the AI properly? So what do I teach the student? Do I teach them how to prompt the AI, or do they teach them the definition? It's all new problems that we have to think about. And well, it's a bit exhausting. So I think short-term efficiency gain or efficiency losses will be pretty widespread as a result.
And Aldo, what are your concerns?
My concerns as a regulator is about the fact that the larger the claim of a medical device, the larger the evidence that you need to assemble to make those claims, and that's always very difficult and expensive. And it shouldn't be the case. That should stifle innovation. And so it's really about making sure that what we call regulatory science, that is the science of evaluating the device, is not construed as an afterthought. You develop your device and then you figure out, oh, I need to assess it, and here's the studies I need to run. But actually, as an intrinsic and integral part of the development process from early on. And so by the time you have a device, that you build up that evidence along the way. We see, especially for small businesses, which is a large fraction of where the innovation resides in this field, we see the potential for, if a company comes to FDA with a product and there may be some flaws in the studies that they did to put together the evidence in support of the claims, then for them to go back and redo some of the studies might be out of the possibilities given the funding cycles. And so incorporating the evaluation methodologies and assessment methods as they go along, and making sure that they use that in early stages of product development, it's more appropriate, I think, and will lead to more successful devices that we'll see coming to the agency.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to add, we hear a lot about bias in AI, and it's a legitimate concern. Frankly, bias predates AI. Even just in clinical research, there's huge issues with bias. So we should always be mindful to bias. For me, a bigger concern are the hallucinations. So I'll go on one of the large language models. I'll ask it a question, and it'll actually give me a pretty good response. And then I'll say, "Can you share your the sources?" And then I'll look up the sources, and they don't even exist. They're like literally, like the content is good, but the source is like totally made up. And going back to complacency, I think that's where early career, not only students but early career people, if you get lazy, you say, "Oh, I'll just use the sources that the system generates." You're eventually going to get embarrassed because somebody's going to look up that source and realize that it doesn't actually exist. So the topic of this conversation is trustworthy AI, and I'll just keep this open, to anybody to respond. But what does it mean to be trustworthy AI, and how can you actually validate an AI system? Maybe we'll start with Sumir. You want to comment on that?
Sure. So trustworthy AI, we've been discussing it for a while now. I think for me, that means that if it's telling me that it can do something and that it's going to do something, that it actually does that. And that if it doesn't do that or it cannot, then I have some sort of an indicator as to how confident it is in that ability. And that goes again back to that uncertainty quantification. That goes a long way towards being able to trust an AI, being able to make sure that it's valid. And that's what we talked about, that continuous monitoring as the models are out in practice. I think that's super important to make sure that they are continuously monitored. And the FDA has a program like that, the PCCP, the Predetermined Change Control Plan. And so as these models are updated over time, that they're still monitored and they can go through that process. I think that makes a lot of sense for making sure that these things are trusted in clinical practice and that they are valid.
And Josh.
Sure. So to your earlier point in terms of the hallucinations, I think this is a huge problem. There are tools that will avoid those hallucinations. If you use Hugging Chat, for instance, it's very similar to ChatGPT. It will provide you, or you can prompt it to allow web search, and it'll prompt you actually to the sources, and it gets the information from those sources.
Josh,
But
could you
it's slower quality.
or put that in the chat? I think a lot of
Yeah.
people would probably love to explore
Absolutely.
that even more. But
So
go on. I
this,
didn't mean to interrupt you.
yeah, this is an open source large language model, and it uses whatever model you're interested in. So you can select to use GPT-4, for instance. I don't think GPT-4 is on there. I think it's like GPT-3, but you can select to use it. There's also things like Mistral, which was created by the people that was it Google's Gemini? I think they were on OpenAI's team, and they wanted to create an unbiased LLM. So they've really focused on that. For a lot of things you'll query it, though, it will kind of create errors. It won't be able to do so well. So there's sacrifices to this transparency, which helps you trust the information that you're generating. I've also heard from a lot of my friends that are practitioners, doctors, that open evidence is quite a useful tool that's trained specifically on the healthcare research. I have no way of evaluating. I'm not in this field. I have no way of evaluating myself. I just heard this is a quite useful tool. I just throw out that name, and I'll send a link to both of these in a moment. But in terms of this point of trustworthy AI, I think we want to take a step back and say, who needs to trust the AI in order for it to be effective? Is it the practitioner or is it the patient? At what level is this important? And that's something that's really open to study. If the practitioner trusts AI, can they convey that trust to the patient? Or should you create this trust first with the patient and the tool and have that prompt the practitioner to adopt it? I'm not sure which model is most effective. It depends on the benefit you want to have. I think here we're all very interested in the accuracy, the unbiased nature of AI. And for me, to ensure that does start with the practitioner trusting the technology. But on the topic of bias, there is a bias in terms of who is the practitioner. It's not a representative career in terms of very high learned positions like a medical doctor or a doctor, a PhD like myself. It's not representative. And so if we focus on creating this trust between the practitioner and the technology, that's serving a biased community. Even though it's creating a link that's practical to the current problem, it's creating a biased, basically, linkage. And that can be problematic because that's going to make it even harder for someone from a poor socioeconomic background to bridge this gap into a career that's very well respected and well earning, like a medical doctor. So these are things we have to think about in terms of, we have a very good mission here of creating trustworthy AI. How we roll it out could really have negative consequences on society if we don't consider, again, the biased nature of AI. And you guys had mentioned the data prior was biased, and this is, of course, how AI learned its biases, is from the biases existing in data. So these are things that are really important to think about. Beyond just the mission of creating trustworthy AI, let's create ethical trustworthy AI. And there's a lot we can get into here. So I know this is kind of open-ended in the discussion, but maybe we'll talk a little bit more about it going forward.
Well, and going back to the human-centered nature of this, when search engines came out, all of a sudden, there was a skill set. People got good at search engine optimization. I think there's eventually going to be a skill set of the users of AI to really know, how to ask the question, how to use the information in a more skillful manner. So Aldo, what are your thoughts on trustworthy AI?
Yeah, I agree with many of the things that the other panelists have said. Going back to the concept of transparency in the sense of disclosure of how the model has been trained and tested, and what are the constraints and relating to the uncertainty quantification of any of the outputs of the model. Certainly, I think that's central. But in that sense, I think we need to have ways to communicate that in a consistent way. And so things like data quality cards that we and others have been working on, and model cards as well, that contain the information that's needed in a way that's interpretable or readable, human readable. It's very important. I want to go back to Pat, you brought up the hallucination problem. This is quite interesting, but we have to remember that this is a new emerging topic. A few years ago, not many, we didn't have hallucinations, or at least we didn't have such a prevailing concept. And to this date, I don't believe there is a consensus definition of what an hallucination is. Some people use it in the context of referring to errors, which is a reasonable context. Some people have used hallucinations to denote errors of a particular type that are errors that can fool a human looking at the output, for instance. In image reconstruction, for instance, there's a clear example where if you use deep learning AI techniques to reconstruct a CT, say, of a patient, some of these techniques may inject features or structures in the reconstructed image that are not in the patient, but they look very reasonable. They look even to a trained expert. So this is a problem for us, because if you don't have a good definition, of course, you can't measure it. There's a lot of progress in this area. So I expect that in the next year or two the field will converge, at least in subfields, say, image reconstruction, or maybe in medical devices, where we can have a definition of what an hallucination is, and start building those tools that will detect and mitigate. There's several authors that have proposed the idea that hallucinations are inevitable, that are part of the fundamental outcomes of the algorithms. And so it will be a question of making sure that we can measure and we can define a tolerance level where it would be appropriate to use a device that would have a minimum amount of hallucinations. And of course, a very, very interesting topic going
Yeah,
forward.
hallucinations also predate AI. I mean, we hallucinate just in our own brains all the time. If we do it intentionally, it's called lying. But a lot of times, we put information together. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I'll have a fact in my head. I'm sure, 100%. And then I'll go back and try to find the source. And again, the source doesn't exist. It's like, did my mind just like literally just make this up? Maybe not, but I think there's some similarities there. So we do have a question. So are there any stellar industry standard examples of AI implementation that you would like to hold up as a case study? And if no, what is an example you would hold as the do not do this? Any thoughts there from the panel?
Well, I don't, but I want to make a comment that might be relevant to the question, which is, and I think Josh alluded to this, it may be possible to use models to evaluate models. And that seems a very interesting proposition because, of course, that could be done at scale and it could be very efficient. But it also raises some questions about the fact that there may be leakage or contamination of the models that actually would not result in a reasonable evaluation methodology. So I just wanted to clarify that. Of course, doing studies with humans and especially with experts is very, very laborious, expensive, multi-year efforts, which we should do some, but we can't use that approach to evaluate all technologies, clearly.
So we're going to start wrapping up here, looking at, what does the future of healthcare look like using an AI lens? So we'll start with Josh.
Well, I
Where are we
can
going with all
also
this?
speak to these industry standard examples if you want a few. So would you like me to
Sure,
chime
yeah.
in?
Start with
Yeah.
the industry. Yeah, start with the question and then go into the future. Yep.
Yeah, so in industry, good examples of AI is basically this is put to an application that's really user friendly. So you have a lot of companies that are working on this, that they're basically making AI accessible. IBM has a really nice model, Watson X, where you can train an AI for your purposes on proprietary data. And it works fairly well with a very low sample. If you have like 100 interactions, it can train a custom chatbot for your purposes. At University of Houston, we're using our university IT is using this tool called Ivy.ai, which is training an AI specifically for university needs on all of our data. It basically has a very slow crawl through our history of data and interactions between students, and it's working well as kind of a little pop-up chat window that is customized to our needs, not like a chat window you'd use on like a website, a customer service website. It's something that's actually practical and helping our students, at least in the test we're running, to serve their needs. Do they need career counseling? Do they need course advising? My Lord, forgot that term. It's quite useful. In terms of do not do this, I don't know any examples off the top of my head, but these are some instances of industry standard examples. It's a all-encompassing kind of wheelhouse for people to use for their purposes, and that seems to be the direction we're going to is again, accessibility, user friendliness rather than capabilities, because the capabilities haven't jumped massively. It's the accessibility to those things. So then coming to Patrick's question about how will AI shape the future of healthcare or the medical field, I guess similar concept. Well, this is a field that is not my expertise. My expertise is AI, so I can talk about how it's going to shift labor. I think it's going to eventually take a lot of tasks that people don't like to do. And this is the task they're going to learn to apply AI to replace. So this can be different by person, but I think there's quite a few things that most people can agree that they don't like doing. They're going to use AI to slowly eliminate or minimize these tasks into their workflow, into their production process. And it's going to, okay, this may be a broad claim, reduce stress from work overall. I think it's going to be slow to come about. I don't think it's going to come about immediately. I think it's going to require a lot of hard work. But maybe in the next 10 years or so, we'll have a whole host of these applications that are well tested and well rolled out, and they're going to make work a lot smoother, a lot less stressful, and it's going to be beneficial for the employee. It's going to make it so quality of life has increased. Now, leading up to that point, I think it's going to be a little bit more stressful than it has been. This is just my opinion. This is what happens when things adjust, when you have some sort of labor revolution, as AI seems to be on the precipice of putting into place. But I'm optimistic for that jump 10 years from now. I just hope we're all still working to enjoy that benefit, and it can maybe extend our work life because we have a few less gray hairs and look a little bit younger because of the lack of stress. But fingers crossed for that eventuality.
Awesome. Aldo, what does the future look like for you?
Yeah, I think it was, I'm going to use a favorite cliche that was attributed to Yogi Berra, or either him or Niels Bohr, that prediction is difficult, especially about the future. But really focusing on the current challenges so that we can deliver on the promises. One of the paradigms that we anticipate is that traditionally medical devices have been fixed in a sense that there's one device that we evaluate when it comes to FDA, either approved or cleared, and it's used with some change perhaps, but within a design concept that doesn't change so much. That's not the case for these type of devices. These type of devices are by nature meant to evolve and to continuously update the training and the performance, and so this generates a new paradigm that we need to address. I think it was in August of the last year that the FDA released what Sumir referred to as the PCCP, Predetermined Change Control Plan guidance, which addresses the issue of how can we, in the regulatory framework, address changes to devices, in AI devices, that are quite often and may have implications. And so that's an area where I think we'll see more and more focusing on real world post-market information rather than having a more traditional regulatory evaluation framework through a package that comes in through a 510K or a PMA route.
Okay. And Sumir, what does the future look like for you?
Sure. First, I just want to briefly address that clinical or that implementation question, AI implementation. So I will say that, for clinical implementation of AI, it does not occur in a vacuum. So to take it back to that calcium screening exam that I had mentioned earlier, a radiology department can't just up and decide that they want to do this and then set up a clinic and these patients are going to get shunted over to cardiology, because the cardiology clinics will get overrun. And so this has got to happen in partnership with all the stakeholders in this healthcare system, as well as the patients, to make sure that everything is occurring according to plan, and that there is good recourse for all of the secondary and tertiary actions that could occur from the implementation of that model. So I think that's kind of one thing to keep an eye out for when you are purchasing these models and you're trying to implement them in the clinical setting. In terms of the future, I'm most excited. Three specific things that excite me the most for the future. One is robust opportunistic screening. So right now, there is a ton of data in healthcare that is not looked at. Nothing is done with it. We don't even know that it's really all there. And so I think that's where there's a huge opportunity for opportunistic screening, whether that's calcium scores, as we talked about before, intracranial calcium for vascular disease, pancreatic cancer, other types of malignancy. There's a huge opportunity for opportunistic screening in healthcare for what we see, and that's just imaging. That's just the top of the iceberg. After that, I'm sure all of us have had a patient or ourselves that have been in the healthcare system, and it is a pain to navigate and to figure out who to see next and what doctor to go to and what make this appointment or who's following for what particular medication needs a refill and all of this. It's a giant jumble, and that's coming from somebody that's embedded in the system right now. So as from an outside stakeholder perspective, I can only imagine how difficult that is. And so personal healthcare agents that can help navigate that whole mess is something that I'm very much looking forward to, and I think we will get there. And then the third piece, not so much healthcare on the front lines, but drug discovery. We've already seen huge benefits with drug discovery. So Google's DeepMind AlphaFold project that they've been working on has shown massive results. I think that's only going to grow in the future, and so we're going to get great less expensive drug discovery on a more personalized level, and that's a future that's exciting to me.
Great. We do have one more, it's a comment more than a question, but I'll read it just for the transcript. So it's fusing AI with a knowledge graph will help deliver hallucination-free experience. Stardog has launched a solution, VoiceBox, last year. So anyway, okay, so we're going to wrap up here. Final thoughts. So what are your take-home messages as we begin 2025? So Aldo, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you. So I guess the two main topics for me would be, one is what are the bottlenecks, and I think data is an issue that we have to solve collectively. And we talked about patient data and synthetic data and how those can be complementary sources. The other thing is not to discredit the evaluation side of things. Again, making sure that the technologies are evaluated in a rigorous way, but also in a timely fashion that makes sure that the good devices get to patients as fast as possible.
Great. And Sumir, take-home messages.
Take-home message that it might feel like we're trying to sip from a fire hydrant right now, and that's true. So hold on, because it's going to be a wild ride.
Great. And Josh, you get to close it out. What are your take-home messages?
So for me, I think AI seems like maybe something that you have to use in your career because of the efficiency gains, but a lot of the realization of that is maybe short-term at best. To really benefit from it, I think it's important to play around with it, use it kind of as a playground more so than a mandatory tool, and learn how does this benefit me? Do I really benefit from using this? Is it something that's going to improve the quality of my work? And think about from this perspective. It's not mandatory. It shouldn't be here to stress you out, to force you to use it, because it's not something that's well tested currently. So use it only insofar that it benefits you. Don't feel obligated to do it, and hopefully have it help you in your career rather than feel like something that's there to harm you. This is what's important for me.
Great advice. Well, thank you all. This has been an amazing, very robust conversation about an exciting topic. I'm sure the audience and the future watchers of this will find tremendous value in the wisdom that you shared. So with that, Happy New Year, and thank you for getting us off to a great start in 2025.
Thank you for having me, Patrick. It's a great discussion.
Yep.
And thank you, Aldo and Samir.
Thanks for having us. Good to meet
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.